Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everyone, welcome to my guide for Cthulhu. Cthulhu is a bruiser guardian who's most often seen in the solo lane, but can be in the support role if he absolutely needs to be. He focuses on medium CC, high damaging, slow moving abilities, all while being one of the tankiest characters in the game. Cthulhu's builds reflect this. He definitely needs a bit of tankiness, but like with Xing Chen, foregoing power leaves far too much damage on the table, so you want to incorporate at least one power item into your build. Relics wise, Cthulhu, despite being very unique, still needs blink thanks to his sluggish movement. Second relic can mostly be whatever you want, although sprint and horrific stand out as they have great effectiveness when teamed with his ultimate. In the solo lane, teleport is seen often too, for a similar reason as it's seen on Jormungandr. The character is for one thing, slow getting back to lane, and also very bad from behind. So using teleport to keep your farm up is a good idea. Another good idea is building up Cthulhu's passive. Cthulhu applies stacks of his passive to enemy gods through his abilities, as well as the final hit of his basic attack chain, which just so happens to be in an AoE, these stacks lasting for a whopping 20 seconds each, and new applications of those stacks resetting this 20 seconds. The passive makes some of Cthulhu's abilities have additional effects, but we'll get to that when we talk about each ability. For now, you just have to know that Cthulhu gains 25 magical power for every enemy with a maximum of 4 passive stacks on them, so if he's in the thick of things, he can hit up to 125 bonus power. So that's how to apply it and how it affects Cthulhu. Well, what does it do to enemies? For the first 3 passive stacks, nothing happens, but upon hitting the maximum of 4 stacks, enemies will have their visuals and audio clouded by insanity, making tentacles and eyeballs and all that fun stuff appear on their screen. And this only happens for them while they're affected by insanity. So this sets Cthulhu up perfectly for a fairly cemented playstyle in both laning and in teamfights. While laning, he likes to have a prolonged fight so that he can keep on pouring on passive stacks with multiple rotations of abilities and of course basic attacks, eventually leading them to be struck with insanity to have things swing even further in his favor with the additional power and bonus effects. And in teamfights, Cthulhu loves to be right in the thick of things, spreading all of his AoE damage and CC around to as many people as possible to get that passive stacked up. So let's talk about an ability both enhanced by his passive and great at stacking it, his first ability. Cthulhu damages all enemies in a small area in front of him, applying 2 passive stacks to all enemies hit, also reducing the attack speed of all enemies hit, and reduces the damage those enemies deal to Cthulhu for a whopping 6 seconds. If an enemy is hit with this ability while inflicted with insanity, as in has full passive stacks on them, they'll be feared and this will permanently increase the damage reduction portion of this ability. So that's a lot of words, huh? But luckily this ability is just as simple as its targeter. The attack speed and damage reduction is great, as is the fear if and when you hit someone who's at max passive stacks, but it's more something that happens in the background. All those additional effects help Cthulhu immensely in trades, but you'd probably start out trades with this regardless of those additional effects or not, simply because it's just very easy to land, especially when you team it with the third hit of your basic attack chain for a swift and extremely easy to hit combo, as well as 3 passive stacks instantly on your target. Speaking of passive stacks though, if your target is at 2 or 3 stacks, this ability will of course put them at the full 4 stacks, but unfortunately it doesn't fear them if you make them reach max stacks. They need to be at max stacks already for the fear to come out, which is alright I guess, since you can't really see visually how many stacks are on someone, so you kinda just gotta count. Whereas if they're at full stacks, you'll be able to see that on your passive bar. Ew. Also Llll is Cthulhu's second ability. Cthulhu enters a channeled state where he fires down a massive damaging AoE, up to 2 times, and the AoE expands slightly as it is cast. This AoE slows, and the first damaging portion slows further, and the final damaging portion roots all enemies hit, both of course applying 1 stack of his passive each. So this is Cthulhu's lane killer as well as his main CC outside of his ultimate in teamfights. It's an absolutely nasty ability, but clearly with its fair share of caveats. For one, it's very easy for your opponents to see coming and avoid it if they have movement or hard CC. Movement is self-explanatory. You press 2, they dash or leap out of the area, and you look kinda goofy. Hard CC is more troublesome of the 2 options for your opponents to have though. If Cthulhu is hard CC'd at any point during this ability, the slowing AoE will remain for a moment, but any remaining damaging portions will be stopped. So that means if your opponent reads that you're about to cast this ability, they'll just CC you and you'll never get a chance to even use the ability. That's one of the main reasons it has such an insane range on it, and you want to try to cast it at the furthest range you can while keeping your intended targets inside of the AoE for the full duration. Despite its difficulty, if you're not used to it, you do want to be going for this ability whenever you can once the late game comes around. The area denial and CC at such insane range is something rarely seen from Guardians, so you want to abuse it all you can, keeping in mind that if you get jumped on for using this ability, you can always just cancel out of it. It's definitely going to take some getting used to, but luckily for most of the game, you'll just be dumping the ability on waves at a distance and relying on your first and third ability for trades. Cthulhu dashes forward, damaging any enemies he directly collides with as well as pushing them aside, and deals damage to any enemies to his sides as well. Dealing damage in any way with this ability applies 1 passive stack and 1 passive stack only. These side projectiles trail behind Cthulhu's wings, so they don't collide the instant Cthulhu goes past enemies. It's most certainly a funky ability, but at the end of the day, it's still a dash like any other. That said, it's almost exclusively for aggression instead of defense due to its speed. When used defensively, it's easy to stop as well as easy to chase after, but when used aggressively, the additional CC helps immensely with justifying the slow speed and makes for perfect setup for his first ability and then into his second. Of course, if you gotta use it to escape, use it, but most times it's kept in reserve for its damage and CC in the early game. Then once Cthulhu is a bit tankier, he can be more proactive with the ability. And finally in the late game, it's used almost exclusively for aggression to set up Cthulhu's ultimate. Cthulhu deals damage to all enemies around him and grows massively in size, increasing his health by a whopping flat 20%. While in this form, Cthulhu is completely CC immune and loses access to his core 3 abilities. Cthulhu cannot use relics, although relics will still affect him, and relics that were affecting him before the ult will still be active. So that means if you have something like a sprint or a horrific, you're going to want to use them before you ult. While in this form, enemies within a 40 unit radius will have passive stacks applied to them, faster if they're looking at Cthulhu and slower if they're looking away from him. Cthulhu has new abilities in this mode as well as new basic attacks. Cthulhu's basic attacks now strike in a massive AoE in front of him, dealing huge damage, but at the cost of being very slow. Cthulhu's second ability in this form still costs mana and strikes in a massive AoE, which does light damage and knocks up all enemies, and also has a wicked long cast time. Cthulhu's third ability in this form also costs mana and deals light damage to all enemies around Cthulhu, and lightly heals all allies too. And finally, pressing 4 again will simply end the ultimate early, so be careful about pressing that one. If it seemed like Cthulhu was rather benign up until this point, this ultimate is why. CC immune, tankiest god in the game, with nearly unavoidable high area damage, and all for 10 seconds all the way up to 14 seconds with levels, it's unbelievably strong. But what's the best way to use it? Well, you want to use it in literally every fight you can. Cthulhu really isn't much of a character when he's outside of his ultimate. He has his second ability and that's about it, so you need to be in your ultimate to do well. But judging the exact moment to ult is important too. Ult too early and everyone on the enemy team simply turns tail and runs away. Ult too late and your team may have already lost a significant advantage without your presence. So typically with Cthulhu ult, you want to aim for after the initial engagement has just finished. This means that either the support or jungle on one team has finished their core combo, and this in turn makes the opposite team burn things like their dashes, relics, and ultimates of their own. It's important to Cthulhu for these things to be down, as his range in this form is solid, but not unlimited. Okay, so you want to aim to use your third ability or blink when the fight is about to hit its middle stage to ult. But how should you perform while you're in it? You want to keep your targets in range for your main basic attack in this form, and typically upon first ulting, you want to start off with your second ability in this form so that you can close the gap a bit and try to keep them in that insanity range, where you'll be passively applying all of your passive stacks. From there you want to try and keep relying on your basic attacks in this form, as the mana cost from your other abilities will really start to rack up quickly, as well as deal considerably less damage than just basic attack. Casting that second ability is quite fiddly as well. It has a mega long cast time, so like many abilities before it, you may want to consider quick casting to keep the indicator on the screen while casting. But keep in mind, any and all abilities you want to change the casting type for in the ultimate, you will still need to change for the non-ultimate ability as well. Using the third ability in the ultimate form is useful sometimes. It's good as a quicker and more reliable damage than your basic attack since you literally can't miss it, and it's something to keep in mind when your team is heavily winning or heavily losing a fight so that you can keep your teammates afloat and still deal some damage in the process. But again, you really do want to rely on your basic attacks in this form to save your second and third ability for key moments instead, rather than spamming them out. Cthulhu's ult is very open-ended and will take a lot of getting used to, but if I had one big thesis around it, it's be aggressive with it. Playing only at the maximum extent of your range almost ensures that your targets will have ample time to escape your range, and trust me, you're never getting them back in range once they've left it. On the opposite side of things though, don't forget how good the ability is for saving you too. While your third ability might not be the best escape, it gives you ample time to pop this ult and just kind of peace out of any bad situation. Again, it's going to take some getting used to, but don't overthink it. Sometimes all ulting as Cthulhu is using your second ability once and then just basic attacking for the rest of the duration. Also something that'll take some getting used to is Cthulhu's combos. Then after that, I have a short clip of a team fight with Cthulhu to help you understand using the ult better. Okay, so here we are in the fight of the century. You can see the fight has already started a little bit here. Ultimates are being expelled, a couple of relics have been burned, and here comes the Cthulhu all the way in the back there. So he's coming around, doesn't waste any time, just immediately blink one, and then boom, into his ultimate, into 4 people. That's what you want to do in Cthulhu. You want to be right in people's faces, and drops down to 2 to start off with. And there you go. And he combos into his third ability in the ultimate. It's actually a little bit faster to do that than basic attacking. Throws down his 2 again to chase. 3 again because his team's all under the tower. Basically, when you have a lot of teammates around you, it's usually better to use the 3 just because you're getting a lot more value out of the usage of that ability. So basically in this fight, Final K, the Cthulhu player here, is just playing a controller, really. He's not trying to bump out a bunch of damage. That's why he's going for the 2s and the 3s over and over again. He's just going for pure utility here. And sometimes that's how you want to mix it up. Sometimes they're really going to need that basic attack damage from your ultimate, but sometimes like this, they just need that utility, that little bit of healing and that little bit of damage, and then those knockups on top of knockups. So 3 again, basic attack, and then into his 2 again. Give it a swipe. Once everyone's in the 3 range, he just swaps over to using the 3. Chases them down, and that was a lot of his team as well, but really those knockups made a huge difference. And okay, the heals, yeah, okay, they didn't make too big of a difference, but the damage and knockups, absolutely massive. He practically won them the team fight with that ultimate. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of the strength of Cthulhu, how you want to use it, which is right in people's faces and just really diving into 5 people. That's what you kind of have to do on Cthulhu, and that's why he's not great from behind, because he needs to be in people's faces like that. But hopefully that gets you a better understanding of how to use the ultimate. For ability leveling, you want your 1 at level 1, your 2 at level 2, and your 3 at level 3. From there, you want to max your 2, your 1, then your 3, leveling the ult whenever you can. In situations where your 2 gets cancelled too easily, and your lane opponents are stopping you from clearing the wave, you can max your first ability instead. Cthulhu is a nasty, nasty character. He's all slimy and veiny and ugh. But seriously, Cthulhu is a rare case of a guardian who can truly solo carry games with his onslaught of CC and damage. Not to mention his laning phase is a breeze with the second ability's awesome clear. Like I mentioned before though, he's really only a good character in his ultimate. In his normal form, he's a slow, moderately damaging guardian with very weak CC. And with a 120-second cooldown on his ultimate, it means that he gets to be a good character only so often during a match, so you need to play without the cushion of that incredible ultimate for extended times throughout the match. This of course leaves you much more open to ganks and of course far weaker team fights if and when the enemy team notices it's down and tries to force a fight. And again, when Cthulhu's both not behind and in that ultimate, he's an absolute menace and he's nearly impossible to kill unless he's the only god on the team left. So make sure you practice playing Cthulhu without access to his ultimate as much as you practice the character with it, and I think his strengths and weaknesses will become more and more apparent to you that way. That's all I have on Cthulhu for now. Thanks for watching.